Hello everyone, this is Lala and today I am back with the Big Brother Archetypes video where I did the fitness woman last time and today I'm going to do the fitness male jocks this time and it's going to be a very long list since clearly when they do cast for the show, they have to think of archetypes. And it's clear that a lot of the men that are cast for the show are cast due to their very fit, appealing bodies because they see eye candy as being a reason for viewership to go up, especially on a summer show. So, how I handled this was whomever is portrayed as being a gym rat and there's a lot of focus on them working out or being very athletic, I'm going to put them on this list. There is going to be some of them who will be on a few other lists, especially the heartthrob list, where their looks and their great personalities and all that stuff are being talked about there, and they're heavily deified. But that's different than the fitness jock, though there is some crossover with a few of the people here. I'm not going to waste much time, we're just going to get right into it. So, the first person in this category is Hardy, and I was literally going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth about whether to add him or not. And I honestly didn't have him on the list until the very last minute. So, I added him right before recording this. So, reasons as to why I didn't initially add him is one, I do feel like he got a lot more focus as a heartthrob, so he will be on that category and discussed at length there. And two, he wasn't portrayed as a dumb jock at all. And I think another reason why is that just based on the era of Big Brother he was on and the season of Big Brother he was on, there really wasn't any sort of athleticism in any of the competitions. So that physical prowess that we see with a lot of those competition beasts in relation to the athleticism really wasn't shown on this season. But I ultimately decided to add him because there are a lot of segments about him working out, whether they were funny segments, whether they showed him being very angry and using his fitness and working out to kind of express that. There's even segments about him talking about protein. He had that fight with Bunky about protein shakes and bartering that, or protein bars and whatnot. And he definitely got on people when it came to fitness. So that was definitely something that was focused on. His body was definitely all good at, and him being so fit was talked about as well. But I think because this archetype really wasn't put into place yet, he will definitely stand out compared to almost anyone else who ends up in this category. And the fact that he was very smart and that was expressed throughout the show caused him to feel like kind of an odd person to have here. But I guess he's the template example that doesn't really follow what would eventually become the formula for this archetype. So, the next person in this group is definitely Eric from Big Brother 3, and it definitely feels like he fits distinctly in this group rather than him fitting in this and another like a Hardy. His looks really weren't talked about in a positive way or much at all on the season. He really wasn't portrayed as a heartthrob. He was portrayed as someone who was very athletic, who was very obsessed with working out, and obviously he had a lot of commentary about being a firefighter, which was a very physical, or is a very physical job. Obviously, he was in a duo with Roddy, but it was always portrayed that Roddy was the intelligent, smart, strategic one, and Eric was kind of just following along. I don't think they portrayed him as necessarily dumb, but he wasn't really portrayed as smart either. And he didn't fit as much into the dumb jock stereotypically as some of the others that would eventually succeed him, but out of any category, he definitely fits this one the most. But he wasn't really around that long on the season to really evolve much either, so he's just kind of like a baseline person to put here. So there's a few people that I could have put on here when it came to representing Big Brother 4, but I do think that the main person that I am putting here is David. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about him being in the military, how he was very eccentric, and some of that obviously had to do with his personality, but a lot of it had to do with his physicality too, like how he would just kind of like jump upside down and hold onto the punching bag, and people knew that he was very, very physical. One of the reasons why I also didn't put him here is because he wasn't portrayed as a heartthrob by any of the house guests or the edit either. He really didn't last long, but that physicality that was associated with him caused him to be snipped very early on, especially after the mess that happened with the Allison Vito situation. But it was clear that he was also smarter than he let on, but he kind of portrayed himself as a dumb jock intentionally, which the house kind of just saw through. Now that I'm really thinking about it, yeah, Dave's going to be the only person from Big Brother 4 that I put on this list. So we're just going to move right on along. So I'm only putting one person from Big Brother 5 on this archetype, and that is definitely Scott from Big Brother 5. I don't know why I froze there. I did think about putting Jace there since obviously he's very fit and he won a lot of competitions. But Jace is clearly a villain, alpha male. That was his main archetype. We did see Scott working out a lot, and he talked a lot about aesthetics and stuff like that. But he wasn't as brazen or as TV prone as Jace was, and you could tell that a lot of it was kind of just his personality, and he wasn't really acting up on it. And he was seen as a lot dumber compared to, or a lot more aloof compared to a Jace or whatever. So I do feel like out of everything, he definitely fit this. Though, I don't know if I'm going to put Scott in that other category as well, but I definitely do think he fits the fitness jock more than anyone else, especially from Big Brother 5. And I really don't have much to say about him. But yet again, this was during an era where athleticism really wasn't a huge focus, and being a swimsuit model wasn't a huge focus either. So, yeah. So, I actually forgot about someone, and that is Matt from Big Brother 9. I thought that only 2 people who are in this video a bit afterwards from the season fit this category, but now that I'm doing videos for Big Brother 9, Matt definitely fits this. Just from his intros, we see him working out, he talks about how physical he is, and throughout his run on the season, people talk about how much of a physical threat he is. So it was something that was immediately pinned out very early on, especially when he and Natalie, who was also very fit, were put together and they performed very well in the competitions. I think I kind of forgot about him because he didn't last nearly as long, and he fits 1 or 2 more categories and archetypes, so this isn't his strongest archetype compared to the 2 others that I'm describing here. But he definitely has a more chiseled body than the other 2, and the other 2 don't really have any other archetype that they fit in compared to him. So I think that's where I was kind of hesitant with him. Alrighty, so I'm putting 2 people here. We're skipping a few seasons and a few years. And the next 2 that I'm putting here are Adam and Ryan from Big Brother 9. And honestly, the main reason why I'm putting them here is because I really can't fit them under any other archetype. They weren't the heartthrobs, they weren't villains or aggressive people on their seasons. They aren't from the East or the South, so I couldn't really pin them into those archetypes. They're clearly not nerdlings or superfans, so I really had no idea where to put them outside of this. And I'm kind of basing it on them winning a lot of the competitions throughout the season. They're these big guys that everyone knew. They're also very tall, so they're kind of imposing when it came to that. But it was clear that neither one of them were the smartest people strategically and just in general. Adam definitely had his goofy moments throughout the season, and Ryan was also portrayed as less than smart. And even Adam had his few blunders as well. So I felt like the fitness jock was probably the closest that they both fit. And you could definitely tell that there are some bro-centric vibes to the both of them in the season, and based on how they spoke to one another and how they spoke to a lot of the other men, so that kind of contributes here. But yeah, honestly, this is pretty much a stretch, and I think because Big Brother 9 is just so random, and they clearly pull things out of the hat to see what would fit, the archetypes aren't as clear-cut this season, but the closest that I can fit these 2 is this. Chronologically, the next person on this list is Jesse, and I feel like he is the most prototypical person of fitness male jock archetype, and this is for a few reasons. One, obviously at the time, i.e. 2008 and 2009, when he was a Big Brother contestant, he was an an aspiring wrestler, and you can definitely tell from his physique that he was a lot more muscular than really anyone before him or arguably since him. And he talked about his weight journey and his health journey throughout a lot of his seasons. We saw him training a lot of people. He was very uptight about his food and his drinking intake and all of that jazz. He was very into branding himself as Mr. Spectacular because he had these amazing pecs, and this was going to be his wrestling persona. So we saw that, and especially in the Big Brother 10 house, where a lot of the house guests were older, and they made sure that everyone was of a different archetype and a stereotype, it really, really made him stand out. And obviously, he got himself on the block the first week because he was fighting with Rennie, then he had to save himself with the veto, and then he won the HOH right after that. So right off the bat, it was clear that he was a comp threat. But ultimately, I think partially due to his rigorous workout schedule, it also caused him to sleep a lot, especially in Big Brother 10, where that was one of the contributing reasons as to why he ended up leaving Big Brother 10 that so early on in the season, outside of him being very into conflict. Obviously, he came back on Big Brother 11 due to the cliques twist, and just by how the cliques were set up with the athletes, the populars, the offbeats, and the brains, and the competition that would determine which returnee would come back was a very physical one. It was clear that they were kind of leaning towards Jesse coming back, and that's exactly what happened. And because he was a returning veteran and he was obviously very athletic, he would join the athletes team, which gave them an advantage. Then they worked with the brains, and then a lot of the women yet again lusted after him throughout the season due to his body. And then I remember he was training Ronnie a lot as well, where Ronnie lost like 30 something pounds or something like that, and they developed a good relationship there. You could definitely tell that Jesse was toning himself down compared to last season, though he was still kind of trying to market himself as Mr. Spectacular, and he was taken out midway through the season due to the twist that happened. And as we all know, he would do cameos in most of the seasons since Big Brother 11, where it was clearly a tactic for him to market his Mr. Spectacular persona, which would lead to him having a very successful wrestling career. And so, with all of this in mind and how self-aware he was with this, and maybe some of the conflict that came due to his appearance, yes, he also mentioned that he felt like people always judged him for his appearance instead of his personality. That's something that always kind of came up, so somewhat of an insecurity of his, but it made him more interesting. But yeah, I definitely think he's the prototypical person of this archetype, though I don't think he's dumb in the slightest compared to some of the others that are in this archetype, or that were before or after him. We are going to move on to the next season, or technically it's the same season since Jesse was on both 10 and 11, but clearly I am referring to Russell. And like I mentioned throughout the last few videos of this series that I am doing, Big Brother 11 definitely helps a lot more with breaking down some of the archetypes, and of course with this being the fitness jocks and one of the teams of Big Brother 11 being the athletes, clearly a few people from this season were going to end up here, and Russell definitely fits the bill. In his intro, he was showing off his martial arts career, if I remember correctly. He talked about it throughout the house, that he can kick people's asses due to it. And he talked about being like a fighter of some sort as well, like non-martial arts fighting. He was always working out. There's a lot of focus on his body and his athleticism. And he always talked about how much of a physical threat he was due to that. And he definitely used that physicality to intimidate people as well. He actually wasn't dumb, so he wasn't the dumb jock, though there are moments where it seemed like he bit more than he could really chew. So while he was kind of smart, he wasn't as smart as he thought he was as well. But we just got a lot of aggression from him. He kind of used the fact that he used an athlete as a way to express this aggression, which rubbed a lot of people the wrong way and even caused a lot of his allies to turn on him. And due to this whole uber masculinity alpha stuff, which will put him in another category. He also clashed a lot with Jeff, who I'm going to talk about very soon. Then they befriended one another because they kind of needed one another after Jesse and his alliance turned on Russell, and then they ended up fighting yet again. Russell's definitely one of the more prototypical people on this casting archetype, but obviously he's going to fit another one that I already kind of discussed already pertaining to him in this section. Obviously, I discussed the two male athletes from Big Brother 11 already, so I might as well discuss the third and final person, and that is Jeff Schroeder. Obviously, he was cast to be a part of the athletes team, so he had to have had some athletic ability, though I don't think they focused on it too much. But when you look at how he sees the game, which we'll see on his 2 seasons, you definitely get that he has an athlete's mentality about certain things. It's interesting that he didn't get along with the 2 other male athletes, or just any of the other athletes within his team, despite them supposedly sharing this commonality. And then we all know about what happened with the coup, but because he was in the quote-unquote underdog side, he was seen as morally better, or at least that's how the edit tried to make it seem like. And then he always talked about violence and threatening people as well, especially with his and Russell's arguments where he's like, I'm about that life too, if I'm shy down and all that jazz or whatever. He's like, oh, you with your fake fights and your fake belts and stuff like that. So he and Russell kind of had that dynamic. Looking at Big Brother 11 and Big Brother 13, he is very much all about competitions, winning, being out there about whose side you're on or what team you're on. There's no playing in the middle, there's no going under the radar. And I do think that he had like that football player mentality when it came to the game, where he wants things to be out there because he really isn't the most strategic person out there. I do think that he fits another category that I'm heavily going to get into. So he's not the cleanest version of this archetype, meaning that they are the sole representation or they're hardcore just fitness jocks when it comes to their archetype. He fits another one that I'm definitely going to get a lot more into, but he fits it here. I was thinking about putting Braden here as well, but I didn't have much evidence to really put him here. So yeah, it's just these 3 for Big Brother 11. So the next person that I'm going to put on here is Brendan, who's obviously on Big Brother 12 and Big Brother 13. He's a very interesting one in the fact that I do feel like it's kind of hard to pin him down to an archetype, but I end up putting him here for a few reasons. One, his intro was mainly about him swimming, and he was talking about being a swim coach, if I'm remembering it correctly. And the second reason is that his main role on Big Brother was to be the competition beast. He saw being a competitor as the most important thing, and his physicality was very hugely emphasized on. It was the reason why the brigade targeted him immediately for like the first half of the season. He had to consistently win out, and he was kind of put into that physical competitor box. But one of the reasons why I debated putting him on here is that he's very smart. He was going for his doctorate while he was on Big Brother. He was very into science, and he talked about that with Rachel. It's one of the things that they bonded about. And he was also very good friends with Andrew, and I think Andrew was a doctor during the season as well. So there are definitely elements of Brendan that isn't just the fitness jock, and he definitely has his nerdier elements, though you could clearly tell that wasn't why he was cast. And then on Big Brother 13, he was kind of just used as a shield. I wouldn't say used as a shield for Rachel, but that was kind of his role on the season. You could tell he didn't really care to be there, and he wanted to help her win. Heck, he won the veto during the week he and Rachel were nominated and chose to use it on her instead of him, where he could have used it on himself and he could have lasted a while. So the whole he's a physical meat shield thing is kind of the reason why I ended up putting him on here for both seasons. And that got more and more focus instead of his intellect while his Big Brother journey went on and eventually came to a close. Also, his mentality about quote-unquote floaters, which are just people who don't win a bunch of competitions instead of people who are actively playing both sides, I do think that element of his strategy and how he sees the show came from his physicality and the mindset of that physicality came from when it comes to the strategic elements. So he says he sees it as if you're not winning a bunch of competitions and if you're not out there, you're not playing the game. So I think that's another way that it kind of influenced his journey and him being a part of this archetype. And the final person from Big Brother 12 that I'm putting here is Hayden. This really shouldn't surprise anyone. He's arguably the most fit person from Big Brother 12, and outside of Brendan, probably the most fit person overall. We saw him win a few competitions right away. He was also working out a lot with a lot of the guys, and him being very physical was very known. I was thinking about putting Lane here, but I do think he fit a few other archetypes more, and he performed pretty poorly in the competitions, where Hayden performed very well in the competitions, and his physicality was definitely a huge emphasis. In general, I do feel like Hayden kind of just fits that fitness jock role where he's kind of generic, doesn't really stand out in any other category. He's just a young, fit, athletic dude who does well. But I don't get the feeling that he was treated as like a heartthrob by the edit and cast either. So I feel like here's like a perfect spot for him to be in, and I don't really have much else to say. He's kind of just a prototypical person of his archetype. He's very similar to Drew, but I feel like he didn't get the heartthrob treatment like Drew did, and his athleticism was more emphasized compared to a Drew. And I also think that the all male alliance thing and sticking to it definitely had it definitely played a part into it compared to a Drew where he drifted and did his own thing. So we are moving 2 seasons to get to our next person in this archetype, and that is Frank, who competed on Big Brother 14 and Big Brother 18. So the first thing that I want to address is that he's the son of, I believe, a wrestler, but either way, he's the son of an athlete, and that was brought up a few times here and there, especially during his first season. And you see him working out, and there's a lot of expectations to come from him in that regard. Right from the beginning, he was very targeted due to his poor social game, being associated with Boogie, and people seeing him as a threat. So he had his back against the wall from the very beginning, so he had to consistently win out in order to make it as far as he did. And if he didn't win an HOH or a veto, he was on the block. And there's also a twist that saved him in the third week. So we definitely saw a lot more of his athletic prowess, and it caused that mentality of win, and if you're not winning and doing what I say, then I'm going to go after you. And Frank kind of saw things through this tunnel vision, one-dimensional way, which obviously clashed with a lot of people in the house. And we definitely saw that he got a more aggressive attitude as the season went on due to him consistently having to win and consistently not having the numbers. Interestingly enough, on Big Brother 18, he wanted to not fit into this archetype where he wanted to lay low, use his relationships and strategy to make it far, but that kind of didn't really take place as his personality was just very big, so that big personality caused a lot of people to be rubbed the wrong way. He was very pushy when it came to his agendas, and he won a few competitions here and there, so he wasn't even laying under the radar like he wanted to. So he's one of the few people who returned from this era who actually tried to do a different strategy compared to a Brendan or a Jeff who essentially did the same strategy, but he was less successful at it compared to like a Jesse. So I do think that's interesting, and it's interesting to compare all four of these men who were returnees and who fit this archetype, but from the post-classic era as well. And Frank, like some of the others that I mentioned, definitely got an underdog edit to where a lot of his more foul behavior was edited out. Okay, so from Big Brother 15, I'm assuming that David's the one that was supposed to fit this archetype the most, or at least that's what casting was planning on, as well as the network, when they're putting together the season. There's a lot of focus on him being a surfer, him being very fit and athletic, and the moving company used that as a reason to justify booting him. But obviously, since he was only in the house for a week, we didn't really get to see much of that on the show. But he fits in that athletic surfer dude archetype that we've seen here and there. So yeah, it definitely fits. The first person in this group, i.e. Big Brother 16, is Devin, and I don't have a whole lot to say about him. It's clear just from looking at him that he's arguably the most physically fit man on the cast, and he talked about having a football career at some point, so that's clearly one of the reasons why he was cast, and I believe he was dealing with steroid withdrawals, if I'm remembering this correctly. But anyways, he had the typical early boot flameout where he was a huge physical force, but due to his ways when it came to how he saw the game and how he came after other people, he was booted pretty quickly. I am going to talk about him in a few other categories, but he definitely fit in this grouping since he aligned with most of the men due to them being physically fit, and he also had a bromance with Caleb due to them having similar mentalities and pathologies when it came to the game and how they saw things. On to the modern era is, of course, Big Brother 16, and the first person from that season who I think fits this category is Hayden, and he's pretty similar to a few others that I've mentioned, or will mention, when it comes to being that athletic surfer slash skater dude, and that being a huge part of Hayden's character throughout the season, and they emphasize that during his casting. I don't have a whole lot to say about him since he didn't get much screen time throughout the season, and he was chilling for most of his time on the season as well, though he was picking up on the game. And he was one of the few guys who actually wasn't a part of the dominant male alliance, essentially, or male majority alliance, whether it was the bomb squad or the detonators. So the fact that he was obviously more physically fit than Adani, it caused him to be a pretty easy target during the double, and I don't really have much else to say. So, the most stereotypical fitness male on this season to me is clearly Caleb from, obviously from Big Brother 16, because I'm clearly talking about that season. He and Devin definitely built a bromance due to them being the physically strongest men in the house, and Caleb talked about his athletic experience throughout the season, and they had similar pathologies and mentalities when it came to how they saw the game. But obviously, Devin started going way too crazy, and Caleb was still trying to work with him, but everyone wanted Devin out. Caleb didn't follow that same fate because, unlike Devin, Caleb is someone who's very moldable and was a very easy meat shield, where he wasn't technically a part of the Detonators Alliance, but because he was so tunnel visioned in how he saw the game, and he wasn't very intelligent or multifaceted with how he saw the game, and because he could win all sorts of competitions, they kept him around and directed him to take shots at whomever he wanted to. And mainly, I'm referring to Derek and kind of Cody as well, to the point where Caleb even took at Frankie, where it was not in his best interest whatsoever. So I feel like this is arguably one of the best case scenarios for a fitness male or a jock who isn't crazy enough where they are too unpredictable to point where they are an early boot, but they aren't a winner contender because they're just followers and they don't see the game in a multifaceted way. They're very one-dimensional and they're not the smartest, so they're very easily weaponized and discarded, and we kind of saw that with Caleb throughout the season. Of course, the brocentricness increased a lot due to this behavior and him seeing the game a certain way, and he put a lot of focus on physicality, competition wins, and all that, and that's generally how a lot of fitness males or athletic males see the show, especially when they're not as multifaceted as Caleb. So I am moving on to Big Brother 17, and I definitely think that Jace was cast to fit that David archetype of being the athletic skater slash surfer dude. He bonded with Austin a lot, and they were seen as the fit bros during the 1 week that he was really there, and there's a lot of talk about him being a huge physical threat, despite him only doing one competition, which is why the entire house was more than fine with getting him out of the house and coming up with this huge backdoor plan. So he kind of fits all the negative elements of this archetype, as well as just being very loud, rambunctious, and not getting along with people who really weren't like him. Alrighty, so I am going to skip Clay because there really wasn't much talk about his athletic prowess or his fit body, and he didn't really win competitions like that. So the final person from Big Brother 17 that I am putting here is Austin. And obviously, he was a huge wrestler. He had this whole gimmick. I'm trying to remember what the name, if it was this alter ego. I think it was Judas or whatever. And he definitely played into that. He's very tall and very fit and very muscular, so he stood out amongst everyone. So people immediately knew what a huge physical threat was. And I also think due to all of that, and him also losing Jace early on, where they got very, very, very close, Austin had to kind of circumvent in a lot of different ways, so he would be able to blend under the radar and to play more of a strategic game. And I definitely feel like he did that, where he grouped up with a lot of the competitors of the game. He decided to lead with his strategic gameplay instead of his physical competitive gameplay. And while he did win his competitions here and there, he wasn't seen as the biggest competitive threat, but he wasn't seen as someone who couldn't win competitions as well. And I think he used the fact that he was very into literature and was very worldly and smart to kind of make bonds with other people. And he circumvented a lot of rhetoric that people in this archetype and stereotype fit under. So he's arguably one of the more successful ones out of this group, because he went out of his way to not solely be the physical guy, the dumb jock, or the person who only led by the physicality. And I also think that him being a fan of the show and knowing a lot of the meta elements of the game and the show definitely helped him compared to most of the other fitness men who tend to be recruits who know very little about the show, and they end up getting played due to it. So I definitely think Austin is very interesting when it comes to this archetype in a lot of other ways, and he stands out compared to most of the others due to him having more knowledge and having more going on for him than his physicality. Okay, so there's definitely a decent amount of muscular men on the Big Brother 18 cast, but I'm not going to be putting most of them on here since, one, their physicality didn't get much focus, two, their athletic careers and their fitness past didn't really get discussed much either, or it didn't play much of a part in their journey in the Big Brother house. But the only person that I am putting on here is Victor. So, from the very beginning, everyone knew how fit he was. I believe he was a trainer at the time of Big Brother 18, and he was doing well in the competitions immediately, even though he didn't last long during his first run on the season. And due to this, it caused people to want to backdoor him. And I remember he was very anal about stuff when it came to the cleaning and the food and all of that. So he kind of had that angry jock archetype and stereotype put on him. Obviously, when he came back, the dynamics of the house changed a lot, and Paul was able to kind of rope him into what was happening, and he was definitely Paul's meat shield for the rest of his time on the season, and the other guys definitely used that towards their advantage. And everyone, no matter whom Victor and Paul aligned with, kind of just used him as a meat shield, as he started winning a lot of competitions from the point where he came back, and he would pretty much do what he was told to do. So obviously, competitions is a huge part of his journey, as I believe he won like 9 of them throughout the season, and then maybe a few more to get in via the battle back, and that was his main function in the game, and that physicality was hugely important to him, and that was what the others mainly remembered about him, and they mainly knew him for. And it didn't help that he wasn't really a strategic player, and he wasn't that social either. So I felt like he definitely is defined by his physicality, his fitness, and his performance in the competitions. Hence me putting him here, where I feel like the others had a lot more going for him, or they didn't fit this archetype much at all, despite their physicality. There is one person from Big Brother 19 that I am putting on this list, and that is Mark. Despite there being a few other muscular men, but I really don't think their athleticism, their fitness, or their bodies had much of anything to do with their casting archetype or their role on the actual season. But Mark, it's clear that he put a lot of pride in him being a very fit man, and he knew that him being fit caused him to need to kind of circumvent certain elements, so he was very, I don't want to say beta male, but he was very toned down personality-wise. He was never much of a leader, so I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he, in general, is just a people pleaser and likes to go with the crowd. but he was put in a position where he was put on the out, so he got a lot more defensive, he got more confrontational, and he then had to start winning in order to last as long as he did. But it's clear that he was cast as kind of in the Austin archetype, where obviously they're physical Goliaths, but they're seemingly sweet, kind, and teddy bear. So I feel like he's similar to Austin in that regard. And it shows the evolution of this archetype, especially when it comes to the modern era of Big Brother, compared to prior and even latter versions of this. But ultimately, he didn't really fit any other category as much as this one. So that is another reason why it did end up parting Mark here. But he's definitely someone who circumvents certain elements of this archetype, and it's just a bit more interesting due to him having sweeter elements to him and him knowing how his image and his build comes across and not wanting to fulfill some of the archetypes that comes with that. Though he was backed into a corner and some of that came out anyways. So that's really all I have to say about him in this regard. We are moving on to Big Brother 20, and the person that I'm referencing, at least for this part, is Faisal. He at length talked about his football career, how he got some sort of injury and it prevented him from being a football player and all that jazz. And just from looking at him, he is very tall, he is clearly fit, he's very athletic, and it's clear that he was cast as the Mark archetype, which I believe they actually, I don't know if production confirmed it or he confirmed it, but there was talk about this on the feeds, and it definitely made sense since they are the big, tall guys who are supposedly sweet and all that, and Faisal definitely fit into that. He was definitely standoffish with a lot of people at first, and I do think some people were definitely intimidated by him, but due to his more low-key personality, he really didn't have a huge target on his back. There was no need to incessantly target him, and because he didn't get the strategic element of Big Brother and the fact that he was easily manipulated, people like JC was fine with keeping him around, and even Level 6 didn't see him as an immediate target in comparison. Though Faisal, at least on a strategic end, though I don't think he's a dumb person at all, definitely kind of fell into that dumb jock archetype, especially when he won his only HOH and decided to target Scotty. He was one of the two remaining people in his alliance, and where everyone else was actively working against him. And then he definitely had a huge ego. He talked a lot about winning competitions, and while he did win a decent amount of his competitions, he thought that would carry him to the end, and then he wanted to work with Angela and Tyler because he saw all of them and his showmance Haley as the power couples and the power players, but there's so much more to the game than that. And he got blindsided immediately afterwards. And obviously on the challenge and in the year since, he talked about how Big Brother was not the game for him due to all of the nuances that he missed, and he definitely fits into this archetype. Though, like I mentioned earlier, he definitely falls in line with the Marks and the Austins, and how the archetype evolved during this era where there are the large teddy bear type of people that they were trying to push this archetype into. So the next person from this season that I'm adding might shock people, and I actually had someone else on this list, but I'm going with Brett. And it's clear just from looking at his build, he's clearly very fit and muscular, and just from what he talked about in the house, it's clear that he's very bro-centric, frat bro, athlete-like. So it's clear to me that he was supposed to represent that funny and douchey jock fitness bro centric guy, and he didn't really fully live up to that, and I think one of the reasons why is that he really didn't do well in the competitions that the season. I think he only won one, so he didn't have that comp beast reputation, and he wasn't seen as a competitive threat due to him not doing well in the competitions. But when you look at the stereotypical traits that a lot of men in this archetype have, not just on the show, but in media in general, they are very obsessed with bonding with the bros, they are very douchey, but they hide it under humor, they don't get along with women the best, they're very insensitive to other people's feelings, and all that jazz. And I definitely think Brett kind of fit under that. And it's ironic that he would befriend two of the people that I'm going to talk about right after this, and they debuted on the next season. But because he was placed on this season with a more likable cast, and with there being more quote unquote hateable people, his more unsavory antics kind of got overlooked. But yeah, he has all the traits of the typical fitness bro that is associated with this archetype in Big Brother and the media overall, but he didn't exude that physical presence, and he didn't get physical in the competitive elements and win a bunch. So yeah. Now we are moving on to the final season of the era with newbies and people who bred to be friendly right after the season, and I'm doing them together instead of individually because enough to talk about them individually, is Jack and Jackson from Big Brother 21. It's clear that the two of them were cast to be the muscleheads of the season, with none of the other men being nowhere near as physically fit as they were, and it really didn't shock anyone that the two of them immediately started bonding right away. They had the same thoughts about the game, they had the same thoughts about life, they had the same thoughts about people of certain demographics, take that however you will, and they both aligned with one another, and they were very authoritarian-like with how they handled the house, how they handled their allies, and how they handled people who weren't their allies. And the camp comeback element really didn't help with that manner. Jack won an early HOH where he pretty much set the standard for the dynamics for the first half of the season. But he got booted mid-season next to Jackson because he was seen as more of a leader and Jackson was kind of on the out at the time. But literally after that point, Jackson just started winning. And he's one of the biggest competition beasts of Big Brother history, where he definitely needed to win those competitions. Otherwise, he or Holly would have been booted relatively earlier on in the jury portion of the season. So he definitely relied on his athleticism to not only carry himself to the end, but to bring Holly there. And this is around the time where the competitions were a lot more athletic in nature. So him being a fitness male definitely benefited him on this season. I do believe both of them will be on another category. Jackson might be on 2 categories. So yeah, there really isn't much different about them. They were both very aggressive with how they handled things. They didn't like floaters or coasters, and they really saw things the same way, which is why they both got a lot of smoke throughout the season, and I really don't have anything else to say about them, so we're gonna move on. So I struggled putting Travis in archetype list, and I feel like out of all of them, he fits this one. Since I do believe he fit that surfer vibe. He was obviously very fit, and he really doesn't fit anywhere else. But he really didn't do anything of note during his short time on the season, so I don't even think he fits this archetype much. But if I had a gun to my head and I had to choose one, I'd put him here. So that says it all, because there's really nothing to say about Travis in general when it comes to how he was on the season. To me, the main person that fits this archetype from Big Brother 23 is Christian. Though when you look at his body, he wouldn't be, or you wouldn't consider him to be the most chiseled or fit person. But he obviously was still very fit, he was very athletic, he was doing like backflips and stuff like that randomly in the backyard in front of the entire house. So people knew of his athletic prowess right from the start. And due to him just winning actually no, he was going to be nominated the first week, but then he won that competition that gave him immunity before the first week. And then he just continuously won competitions throughout the pre-jury, and he won competitions that he really didn't need to win. Like he won the veto where Xavier was HOH, I believe, and then he won HOH and veto right afterwards. So yeah, he won 3 competitions in a row. So it really built a huge target on his back, and he was used as a great shield by the cookout members. So by the end of the pre-jury, he ended up being backdoored. And yes, there was Derek X, who was also a competition beast, but he wasn't seen as an athletic beast compared to Christian. So I think that's why I have him here and not Derek. But in general, he kind of fits the standard pre-jury fitness dude who isn't an alpha male who gets booted. We're finally getting close to the end here, and the first person from Big Brother 24 that I'm going to talk about is Joseph. Just from looking at him, it's clear that he's the most chiseled and fit guy of the cast. He's very well defined, and he has experience being a personal trainer. And he actively hid the fact that he was a lawyer, and he definitely played into the dumb jock label. And I think this happened for a few reasons. One, people don't want to know, or it's not a good thing for someone to know how educated and successful you are career wise, especially at the age he was in, where he's still relatively young. And two, I also think that it's because he didn't know much about the show, so it's just easier to kind of play dumb, especially when you didn't or you don't know much about the show, how it functions, and all of that jazz. Obviously, he bonded with Monty, who will be on this video. Surprise, surprise. So they're kind of seen as the two meatheads, and people kind of exaggerated how close they were due to that and a few other reasons. So people were really, 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 really threatened by it. But despite that, Joseph didn't win a single competition throughout the season. While I do think he threw some, he also didn't do well in a lot of the competition, so they couldn't really use the argument that he was a competition beast to get him out of the game. But I also think him being shielded with Monty was a good thing at first, but then it became to the point where he became the shield and he was eventually taken out due to it. So I guess this could show how two people of the archetype being so close can be a negative thing and how it builds a target on your back. He might be on one or two more archetypes through the videos. I don't know for sure though, but this is definitely the main one that fits Joseph, and I do think casting had this in mind when they cast him, especially when he was originally an alternate and he replaced another guy who was very fit and into athletics. So I did end up spoiling who is next, and that is Monty. And obviously, from his height and his build and his career, which at the time was solely being a personal trainer, obviously that was what casting had in mind when they cast him for the season. And like I mentioned earlier, he and Joseph had a lot of commonalities when it came to their careers, their athletics, and they became close friends, but they weren't BFFs like how many people tried to portray them as, where he was closer to Kyle strategically and personally, but that was overlooked. And there's a lot of reasons for that. That doesn't really involve this archetype, but involves other external factors. Monty was definitely in a good position at first, and he used his position as the fitness jock where all the people in the house wanted to work with him initially, and he definitely used that towards his advantage during the first few weeks of the season, and he was pretty much the yes man to whatever Cal stated. But somewhere after the Leftovers was formed, he was kind of isolating himself from everyone else, and a lot of people felt burned by him. So there are people who were targeting him, and he was the shield for someone like a Joseph. But then things started to switch as the weeks went on, and then there was the whole Dire Fest situation, and then Joseph was booted there, and then Monty still wasn't seen as the most athletic. It's weird. Monty always had the target of him being an athletic beast, but with Michael winning a bunch of the competitions and winning more competitions than Monty at that point, a lot of people started focusing more on Michael. And it bothered Monty a lot that someone who had the frame as Michael was beating him in a lot of the competitions. But of course, he won that veto that sent Michael home in the final six. And after that, Monty essentially started winning all of the competitions from that point onward. And he was really the kingpin for the last portion or the end game of the season, though he ultimately made the wrong choice at the end. So when there's more than one person of this archetype working together, and especially if they have different elements that involve skin color and stuff like that, people definitely perceive you a different way. Even people who are close to you, like a Kyle, will misinterpret you. So Monty definitely had to deal with that. But he was also insecure about being the jock who was supposed to win everything, but that didn't happen for a majority of the season. So we are finally getting close to the end with Big Brother 25, and I have two people on this list, though I'm pretty sure I could put a few more, but I don't think they are fitness jocks per se. The first person is obviously Matt, and he's an Olympian, or was an Olympian. Anyways, he had experience in the Olympian where he's a very successful swimmer and he works out a lot. He has a very fit body and he made money at some point on his athletics. And clearly, when the producers cast for the season, they knew that, which is why they cast him to fit that role. And it was kind of interesting to watch with him since obviously he's hearing impaired. So adjusting to how people communicate and even how the competitions are explained to him by the producers or whatnot was definitely a challenge. So it took him a while to adjust to the competitions. But in addition to that, I don't think he wanted to win a lot of them throughout the season as well, and some of them he just couldn't win. But the few that he did win throughout the season were heavily physical. And despite him having a close relationship with Sari, he wanted that bromance, and we kind of got that with Jag throughout the season, to the point where Matt won that power and he used it to save Jag from being affected. And after the midway point of the season, they became a duo and they kind of started alternating competitions. And with the competitions being a lot more athletically inclined and them being bro jocks, pretty much they kind of just steamrolled to the end and it really wasn't fun to watch. There was some commentary about how he talked about the woman in the house that season, and some attributed it to him being the typical jock who only cares for women if he wants to sleep with them, but otherwise they're very brocentric to the point where they exhibit and promote toxic masculinity. And I know that was a conversation that was brought up a lot when it comes to Matt, so he definitely fit that in that way. But obviously he lost at the end, and he had trouble owning things. But anyways, Matt, having the disability that he has while fitting this trope definitely makes him stand out compared to everyone else who's a part of it. And now it's time to talk about his ride or die in Jag. And obviously, he's a different person in this category due to his racial slash ethnic makeup and there being a lack of that representation on Big Brother USA in general. So I do feel like a lot of his content revolved around that instead. But looking at his history and what he talked about in the house and his eventual role on the season, it's clear that he was a fitness jock and a fitness male. I believe he had an extensive career in football while he was younger, and he's very athletic and fit, works out, and does other sports as well. So it isn't shocking that once it was time to play the game, he kind of had that mentality where it was like, okay, I have these set group of allies, we're going to ride or die for them, we're going to beast all the competitions and stuff like that. And he really bonded with the people that weren't like him, which tends to happen with a lot of the fitness males. But things weren't going his way, a lot of his allies were going home, they lost power, and he didn't really know what was happening in the house. But the flip that happened mid-season definitely benefited him more than anyone else. Sorry, before I even get to there, I have to bring up Matt, his athletic friend, saving him from going home due to the twist that Matt won specifically for that week. So that happened, and that's the reason why he wasn't a pre-juror boot. But obviously, when it came to the flip, he and Matt seized the opportunity where they decided to pick up some of the allies that Corey and America kind of left hanging, and they picked up Bori Jane, which definitely helped as she was tired of the Sari group of people. And then from like the 2/3 portion of the season onwards, he just beasted the competitions. I believe he won at least one competition every single week afterwards. He was able to lull Cameron into a false sense of security for them being all the fit comp beasts winning the competitions. And literally, Jag was unstoppable to the point where he ended up winning the season. And people talk about Big Brother 25 being the season where a lot of the more athletic competitions and the athletic elements and all the competitions caused for a huge imbalance, and they mentioned that was why Jag lasted so long. So that's definitely a factor there. So, on to the final season. As I'm recording this in Big Brother 26, I have Cedric. I thought about putting Matt here, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna put him in another archetype, and I'm mainly putting Cedric here because I couldn't really fit him anywhere else. I don't think he was cast to be the heartthrob of the season. He clearly doesn't fit into the aggressive alpha male. He's not a religious god worshipper. He's clearly not a nerd. He doesn't really fit anywhere else. So I felt like he fit here. And it makes sense because they did talk at length about his military experience. And in order to be in the military, you need to have some sort of athleticism. And we did see that athleticism during his short time in the house, where he did well in the competitions. But I think his main thing was the fact that he was young and he's very naive. And that eventually bit him in the butt, especially due to him not having any knowledge of the game. So maybe the naivete and not being the smartest when it came to the game could be attributed to being a fitness male in addition to him being generally athletic, but I don't really have much else to say. And the final male overall that I'm going to discuss in this long video is Cameron. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about him being a prior football player when he was in school. He went to college for it. And clearly from his build, you can tell that he's very athletic and very fit. But he got an injury and it caused him to switch careers where I believe he's a physiotherapist or something along the lines of that. Of course, they didn't mention on the show that he's a TikToker or social media influencer, but that's kind of just besides the point. Due to this appearance, or his appearance, when it came to his build, and I also think due to just his more laid-back personality and chill personality and not really caring much about the game, he wasn't seen as much of a threat in comparison. It honestly kind of benefited him to not win competitions, though he was trying to win most, if not all, those competitions, so he got upset at that. But it made him unintimidating, in addition to just his personality giving unintimidating as well. But as the game went on, and as he continued to not really care much about the strategic element, it caused him to not have any jury prospects at all. So I think there are other reasons why he had to remain calm, and I think he knew that optically it wouldn't look good if he was taking control, if he was aggressive or confrontational. So I definitely do think that's another side of it, or at least when it comes to Cameron. But he did make it to the end, but he wasn't taken to the final two, and even if he did make it to the final two, he wouldn't have won. But I think he kind of shows how different the men who fit this archetype from this specific era are compared to how they were even in all of the prior three eras in comparison. Alrighty, so that finally concludes this video and the fitness archetype for both genders overall. I ended up recording this within the time span of a week just due to all the stuff happening in my life and then doing videos for my other channel as well, and it being the holidays, so I was definitely overwhelmed with making it. I think, emphasis on think, that this might be the longest video that I make when it comes to the archetypes, though I could easily be proven wrong as I go through it. So the next video that I'm going to make putting the archetypes is the Southern Belle / Redneck archetype, and this is a very simplistic way of stating that it's going to cover people from the southern United States. So I don't know if I'm going to split it up within gender like I did the last two videos, or technically the last 4 videos, or I'm just going to put it all in one. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more soon. Take care.